I've been thinking a little bit lately about how many things in life are, by nature, a process as opposed to an event. Forgiveness is this way. It would be a lot easier. Forgiveness would be much easier if it was an event where I would just say, okay, boop, I forgive, and it's gone. It's taken care of. The memory of that event no longer injures me. Doesn't work that way. It might for tiny little surface scratches of emotional offense, but for the deeper wounds, it's not an event. It's a process where I choose to forgive, sometimes for a very long time. Well, there's a process that's in the sense that it's a process is similar to this process of forgiving that John talks about here in 1 John chapter 4. We've been hacking away at verse 18. There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. And we've worked our way through that. And then he goes on to say, the one who fears is not made perfect in love. Now, let's think about what that could mean. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. Okay, it's really just a statement of fact. When I fear, this is a demonstration that the process of God bringing me to perfection hasn't completed yet. The perfection of His love is still in process. Now, not the perfection of His love. I said that wrong. The work of His perfect love is still in process in my life. That I am not done. The idea, the concept behind this word perfect is also complete. In fact, James, in the book of James, in his letter, talks about us being mature and complete, not lacking anything. There it is. That's the whole package. And that's what God's love in relation to our fear, specifically our fear of punishment, is at work in a process to bring us to a fullness, being mature, perfect, complete, not lacking anything, so that instead of a fear of God's punishment, we have a confidence. John says we have confidence on the day of judgment. Because of how good we are? No. Because of God's love for us. And the more deeply, thoroughly convinced I am, the more completely that's been woven into the thinking and behaving, the doing and the being in my life, the more confidence I have. Again, it's not about, hey, yeah, I got this thing nailed, God, and we're good, right? That's not, it doesn't ever get there. But what I get to is that God has got this thing, and I can trust Him. I can trust His love. I can trust His perfect, complete, unconditional, agape love, that it covers me. Well, the one who fears is not made perfect in love. So there's some implications here. And the first implication is that when I fear, I'm not yet made perfect. I am not finished. Okay, the process of God working His love into into my being. It's not finished. We're still working on this thing. And by the way, the nature of this process is not that God is over here with his arms crossed, tapping his toe, going, "When are you going to pull your stuff together and get it in here?" Right? I mean, are you going to keep mailing it in, or are you going to actually? That's not God. It might be your boss or your mom or dad, or I don't know who it might be, but it's not God. See, here's how it works. I got this idea from three guys who wrote a fabulous book called True-Faced. And then they rewrote it and re-released it under the title of The Cure. Instead of God being over there waiting for me to get perfect, right? He's got his arm around me, and what he's saying is, let's stay in the process with me. Let's keep working on this together. I find that, that's a huge encouragement to me. If instead of me having to be better and do this stuff on my own so that God gives me the nod, I'm walking in partnership. He's here. He's not just here observing me hacking away at this thing. He's working with me on it. Okay, that's one aspect. The one who fears again, it's not just all these generalized fears. Although I think in principle, it could be. What John's talking about is fear of judgment. However, when we have this issue of judgment settled because of the process of God's perfect love working itself into our lives, there's a lot of words, but as I see it, that's what this is about. When we have that layer of confidence, and when his perfect love is growing to its completeness, toward its completeness in my life, other fears begin to recede as well. Will I ever not be initially afraid of snakes? Probably not. I just have this thing about snakes. I've told you this before, and if you're a snake person, then forgive me, but the only good snake for me is a dead snake. Well, what about the ones that aren't poisonous, and they eat rats and rodents and insects, and they're good for the planet? I can't discriminate between a good and a bad one. They all give me the heebie-jeebies. I'm basically scared of all of them. Was that going to go away because I have this confidence that God's love, his agape, perfect, it cannot be added to. That's what perfect is. That kind of love, that's his love for me, so that this fear of judgment goes away. Well, the fear of snakes may not go away, but fears that previously held me hostage, that are not connected to God's judgment of me, those fears, believe it or not, can be reduced because of this confidence in God's love regarding his judgment of me. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying the number one best therapy for any kind of phobia is get the judgment of God thing squared away. That's not what I'm saying. But I will say this. It doesn't matter very much if you're able to get the phobias addressed if you haven't got the judgment of God thing squared away. See? Oh, and by the way, remember, you don't square it away. What happens is you get squared away with how and why and what it looks like to accept, to receive, embrace God's love, his grace poured out moment by moment in this process of bringing us to maturity, to completeness, to perfection. I read a line this week in a book I'm enjoying by John Ortberg. He said, "Don't mistake perfect with perfectionism." And it's a little bit splitting hairs, but it's worth taking a look at. God is perfect. And in fact, if that's not a big enough idea, he says, "You be perfect as I am perfect." Ooh, man. I'm not sure I'm going to be able ever to measure up to that. Perfect. There's a difference between perfect and perfectionism. Perfectionism is never satisfied. Perfectionism, you'll never get there. You'll torment yourself and everybody around you if you're a perfectionist. Oh, and one more thing that's going to happen if you're a perfectionist is you will constantly, everlastingly procrastinate. You will put it off and put it off and put it off. And I think I have experienced, and I think I understand why. Because if I can put it off, well, first of all, I'm not ready to start it until I've got every single duck in a line, until it's already perfect in my head, whatever the project is. And then here's the second thing about it. I'm not gonna give myself an opportunity to have time enough to have done a job that should have been perfect and it not be. It's a weird deal. Okay, get off that. That's a bunny trail. We don't need to travel any farther down. But God is not a perfectionist, but he is a perfect God. His perfection has to do with his absolute completeness. Now, I think I will reach that, but not while I'm living. I think he will transport me and in a sense transpose my life from its imperfection to its perfection when I see him face to face. And that's just my idea. I don't have a chapter and verse for it. I do know that the way I endeavor, the way I effort, and there is effort in this, toward this be perfect as I am perfect, is my only way to do this is to, it's like a double-edged sword. I imitate God, what I can understand, what I can see of God's completeness. And then I take into my life in all the ways that I'm able to his perfection. And I think his love, this perfect love of God is our best way of doing that. Because I can't be perfect in execution. I'm just, some days I'm going to do better than others, but I don't think I'm going to be perfect. But I do think this perfect, complete love of God will complete me in a process, carrying me from incomplete toward complete, from immature toward mature, from imperfect toward perfect. Okay, that's a lot to think about. And I think the challenge of this is to look into each of our own lives for ourselves. I can't look into yours and you don't get to look into mine. What are things today? Right when you get, I'm going to be done in about 10 seconds or 12 or anyway, a few. When I'm done, what could you do to embrace this perfect love of God more? How could you permit him, as he is alongside of you, saying, let's go to work on this together? ask him to give you some insight, because he will. I'll see you next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.